Hi, my name is Robert. This video is designed to give you step-by-step detailed instruction on completing the task at hand. Visit my YouTube channel and watch my disclaimer video. And please like, share, and subscribe. I hope you find the information you're looking for. Thank you very much for watching. Okay, so to replace the brake pads on the Volvo 850, the front pad and calipers are similar to many other cars. What you want to do is you want to take the wheel off. You want to loosen the bleeder, take a little pressure off the pads, and then on the back side there's an Allen screw. One on top, one on the bottom. You stick an Allen in there, take those bolts out, take this clip off the front, and then the caliper just opens right up. You want to put in the new pads, grease them, grease the pins, and put everything back together. So let's go ahead and cover this step by step. Here's the tools I use to do the front brakes on the 850 S70. I got a torque wrench, a pair of gloves, needle nose pliers. I got the screwdriver, the hex tool to take the caliper apart if I'm not replacing the rotors, 14-15 box in. I got the 15 millimeter socket, the 3/8 drive, brake lubricant, 10 millimeter deep 1/4 inch and a 1/4 inch ratchet to get the brake bleeder loose. You also need a C-clamp, which I don't have photoed here. Okay, before I jack the car up, the opposite side you want to put a piece of wood to set the wheel so hopefully it don't roll. Something bigger would be better. I set the parking brake. I pulled the parking brake slowly. The parking brake system on these cars are a little sensitive, so you don't want to jerk that cable around. You don't want to break it. I've already broke those lug nuts loose, and I jacked the car up slowly. So when you jack the car up, the front and the back tire will come off the ground. Now I'm going to pull those lug nuts off, and I'm going to set a jack stand under there for safety. Okay, I lowered the jack on the jack stand. That's where I position the jack stand. Now that the wheel's off, you can see the rotor and the brake pad assembly, the caliper. What I normally look at on rotors is how much wear is in a rotor. When you get a rotor that's brand new, this surface is smooth all the way to the end, and sometimes it even bevels in at the end. As a pad wears a rotor, it actually wears a groove right here where you see that rusty track, and you can see in a lot of rotors a groove is cut deep into there. So if you want to know if it's time to replace a rotor, you can look at it through the wheel before you pull the pads off and see how deep that groove is. You can even get a filler gauge, and there's allowances of how thick this rotor is even with the wear before you're supposed to need new ones. So that's how you kind of glance at the rotor to see if it's worn out or not. Alright, now you got your brake caliper in place, your wheel's off. If you remove your brake caliper, the only thing that would be holding the rotor on is this pin here. This is a 10 millimeter bolt on this pin, and when you pull that pin off, the rotor just falls right off. So next thing you want to do in replacing your brake pads is I normally take the bleeder loose a little bit. A lot of air won't get in there. And then I pry the brake loose a little bit so that I can get the caliper loose off of the rotor, because right now the brakes are set kind of against the rotor. So I'm going to take my bleeder loose, which is probably a 12 or 13 millimeter on there. Take the little cap off, take that loose a little bit. Then I get a screwdriver or some kind of pry bar in there to pry a little slack in my caliper brake pads. That bleeder turned out to be an 11. I went on ahead and took it loose a little bit, one turn. I do that because when I try to pry the pad open and the caliper open a little bit, it's going to force pressure in there, and if I got the bleeder open, it will allow the fluid to force the pads loose and most of the time I'll get a little bit of fluid out of the brake caliper, as you can see there, as I get that pad loose, so that I can get the pads off a little bit later. Didn't have a screwdriver with me, so I used the thing to pry that loose. Try not to scar up your rotor. So normally it's better to force a screwdriver in between your pad assembly and your caliper to get that loose. Once you got some slack in there, go ahead and close your bleeder off so you don't get too much air in your braking system. Next thing I do is I pull the dust cap off of the bolt. You got a bolt here, and then you got another one down low. You pull these caps off, and then you can have access to your bolts that hold your caliper together. These two bolts are not going to take the caliper totally off. It'll just take the parts loose so that you can get the bolts out and start getting your brakes loose. So that's the cap. Set it where you don't lose it. Somehow those things like disappearing. So the next thing you want to do is take your Allen tool. I actually have this bit for a 1/4 inch driver that I adapted to the 3/8 inch. You take that, you put it into the sleeve where it'll fall into that bolt inside there, and then break it loose, and then do the bottom one the same way. So let me go ahead and break this loose and get these two bolts out. These pins have a habit of pretending that they're not out. So once you think they're all the way out, go ahead and take some pliers or a screwdriver or something and go ahead and push them the rest of the way out so that you can lift the caliper off. Next thing you want to do is go ahead and pop these clips out of the calipers on both sides. They come out pretty easy. Now the caliper will lift off with the brake pads on it pretty easy. You want to make sure that you don't damage your brake lines back there when you're pulling this caliper apart off the brake pads. And you also want to check your brake lines while you're there. Go ahead and bend them over, see if you see a lot of cracks. If you see cracks, the brake lines need to be replaced. A lot of people take a hanger, hang it from the strut spring there, and hang it on the caliper so that they don't put a lot of weight on that brake line down there. So they take a hanger from here down to here and hook it on the caliper. So let me go ahead and pull this caliper off. So that's how the caliper comes apart, and as you can see, the inner brake pad is still on. It's normally stuck in the caliper with a couple of clips, and then the other pad is sitting here. Go ahead and pull the pads off. Now you see your caliper piston there. As you can see, it's one big piston, and when it pushes on that brake pad, it also pulls on the one on the opposite side. That's why they wear evenly. So you want to spray this stuff down with brake pad cleaner. You want to inspect your piston to make sure it's in good shape. As you can see, this boot is torn. So you should really plan to replace that boot, rebuild this caliper, or replace it. Now, what I normally do here is I break the brake bleeder nut loose again. I put the pad back on the caliper there, or one of the old pads, put it in place like that, and then I put a C-clamp on this whole part here. I thought I had it with me, but I don't see it. And I clamp the piston and compress it until it's level and all the way compressed, because you're not going to get the new pads on if that piston is sticking out like that. Now, as soon as you get that piston compressed, you go ahead and close off that bleeder. Hopefully you didn't get too much air in it. And the next step you want to do is clean up. You spray everything down with the brakes part cleaner, and then you lubricate everything that touches the brake pad path, except for, of course, the surface of the brake pads. So you want to put brake lubricant on here, and all this reduces squealing. Some of them have shims on them, but I put the lubricant grease there, Then I take the lubricant and I put it on the inside of the caliper here and on the inside of the caliper here, because that is going to be pressing on the new brake pads. Next, you want to lubricate the pin shafts. Then you want to put a little lubricant on the inside of the brake pad there, and some lubricant on the brake pad where it'll touch the caliper there. Then you can put everything back together. About the hardest part of this whole process is getting these clips to go into the brake pad caliper there. So with two hands, you want to put that in place and force those clips into that caliper. So I got the new pad in place there. Another place that I put lubricant is along here, because the brake pads roll along that path, and that'll also reduce squealing. You take the new pad, put it on just like that, hook it on there. Now you want to hook your caliper back on. Again, I grease this area of the pad here and here, because when that caliper goes back on there, it'll hold that pad in place there, and I don't want it squealing. And it's just, you know, some brake lubricant like this, or some heavy duty grease will work as well. Once I got the caliper in place, I take my grease pen, I put them through the rubber boots back there, and I get my Allen screw and get them started back into the caliper assembly, top and bottom. You take your torque wrench, if you get it in there the best way you can to torque those down to the proper torque spec. Next, you take the dust caps, you put them back over those hex bolts, because you don't want them getting filled up with dirt and junk like that. They slide right in there like that. Last but not least, you fit your hanger part back on here and put that in place, which will hold your brake pads in place from banging around in there and rattling. How I normally get this on is I put the top one in, pivot it down, put the bottom side under there the way it's supposed to go, and then I get a needle nose or a hook ring or something and screwdriver, and I push that up to the other hole and push it in with my finger. Alright, now that I got that in place, it's all done. Okay, so if you know you have bad rotors and you're going to have to pull a caliper anyway, I wouldn't even bother with pulling the caliper bolt off. I would just go ahead and pull the two bolts off that hold the caliper, the entire caliper on, and those bolts are 15 millimeter. They're not 14. So pull that bolt there, pull the other bolt down the bottom, and then you can move the whole caliper off of the rotor. Now, once you get the caliper out of the way, the only thing that's holding the rotor on is this pin right here. You pull that 10 millimeter pin out, and then this whole rotor will come right off of the wheel hub assembly. Once you have the caliper off the rotor, see it stored back there, you go ahead and pull a pin that holds the rotor onto the hub. Then you can lift the rotor right off, and you're left with the hub. So that's how easy it is to get these rotors off. Take your rotors, get them turned, or take your new rotor and just place it on the hub there. And once you get it on the hub, you line the pinhole up like that, and you stick that pin back in there. And with that entire caliper off of the rotor, you can go ahead and put the clamp on there and compress that piston and take the brake pads off, put the new brake pads on. Now, when you're putting the tire back on or the wheel back on, this pin goes in a certain position on the inside of your wheel assembly. So when you flip your wheel over and look at the inside, normally Volvo wheels have 4 pins sticking out that fall in these other locations, and then where this pin falls, there's not a pin on the inside of that wheel. So whenever you got your car somewhere and they're taking wheels off and putting them back on, You might want to mention to them that that pin drops in that void area in the wheel. I've had mechanics take those wheels and force them on. The pin cut into the wheel, warp the rotor, damage the wheel, drive down the highway. 5 minutes later, I can't even get the car to ride smooth because it's been damaged because somebody didn't put the wheel on right with that pin there. I go ahead and put my wheel on, torque my lug nuts down, and call it a day. Now, when you put your lug nuts in, I normally snug them in, and when I torque them, I skip a bolt. I'll torque this one down, this one down, this one down, this one down, and this one down. That's supposed to help you avoid warping your rotors. If you feel that this information was beneficial, please like it and share it with your social media friends. You can also subscribe to my channel so that you can get notification of future videos that I post. Visit my channel. I have all types of do-it-yourself videos there. You can leave questions here and I'll try to respond to them as quick as possible. You can also visit my website at robertspinner.com. Thanks again for watching.